What does it mean to be born into a name whose meaning the world has already decided? When your last name whispers something before you ever speak a single word. In the hills of West Virginia, two young men, Brandon and Luis Whittaker, carry a family name that echoes through the silence. Not for power, not for fame, but for something far more haunting. They are the next generation of a lineage shaped by poverty, by isolation, and by something deeper. A silence passed down just like blood. Raised within the shadows of misunderstanding. Spoken of more often than they were spoken to. These two possess something their elders never had. Words. This is not a story about inbreeding. It is a story about inheritance. Not of money, but of memory. Not of glory, but of burden. And perhaps, just perhaps, about the fragile hope of breaking a cycle by daring to speak directly into that silence. Odd, West Virginia, a place whose very name feels like a kind of warning, is tucked within the folds of the Appalachian Mountains. It doesn't appear on many maps, and for many years, few people dared to go there. It isn't the kind of silence you hear. It's the kind that grows in the spaces between rotting porches and broken fences. Between bloodlines that loop back on themselves, between stories that nobody ever tells. This is the stillness, this is the shadow, into which Brandon and Luis Whittaker were born, into a house already heavy with history long before they ever took their first breath. They didn't have an upbringing like most kids. There was no framed graduation photo waiting on the wall, no bedtime story. Their earliest memories are of wood creaking under bare feet, the air thick with cigarettes and the unspoken weight of all that came before them. They were raised by Larry. Not quite a grandfather, not a father, but someone who tried. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. Someone who had already said too little, who had seen too much. Their mother was there sometimes. Their father, just a name they never knew. What remained was the silence, the house, and the eyes of others. Because in Odd, everyone knows the Whittakers. And everyone has something to say, though not to them, always about them. Brandon remembers people who would drive by the house just to stare. Sometimes laughing, sometimes filming. Luis remembers the day a bottle was thrown at their yard from a truck window. They were young, but not too young to understand they were different. Not too young to know that shame can arrive long before understanding. The world outside was distant, the world inside was confined. And yet, they survived. Their playground was the rusted back porch. Their lullaby was the hum of a box fan and the quiet sobs of grown-ups after the lights went out. They grew up in a house built not just of wood and dust, but of repetition, of choices repeated, of names repeated, of silences grown too old to break. And still, Brandon and Louis stood within that silence, blinking out at the world, already carrying a legacy they never asked for, already searching for something more. The Whittaker name became known not for words, but for the absence of them, for barks and grunts, for glances and silence. For a family whose mouths rarely formed a language the world could understand. And then came Brandon. Then came Louise, born into that hush, but not held completely inside it. They speak not just with words, but with pain, with memory, with questions. Louise once said, "It was fun when we were little, until you get older and you understand what's going on." He remembers his mother disappearing for days, the shouting, the sirens. He remembers the confusion, foster care, being taken away, strangers. He was 6. Brandon remembers being passed from house to house, eventually to an aunt. He remembers quiet rooms, food that sometimes came late. He remembers the growing awareness that other families weren't like his. But they speak. They say they want out. Brandon says, "I'll probably get away from here, as soon as I can save up." And they dream. Luis once thought he'd become a nurse, maybe even a doctor, something that would heal, something that would matter. They're not loud. Their voices don't beg for any sympathy. They're deliberate, careful, as if the words have to earn their way out. But they speak, and that single fact makes them different. Not removed, not better, just different. They are the first to put voice to the silence, the first to answer questions their uncles could only blink through. The world sees Brandon and Luis as the next Whittakers. But they are quietly, steadily, trying to become something else. Every family has its fights. But for Brandon and Luis, the fighting wasn't just yelling. It wasn't just fists. It was the sound of a gun going off inside their home. Luis remembers it clearly. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. He was maybe 6 or 7. His grandfather, Larry, the man who tried to raise them, fired a gun at the wall, aiming near their stepfather. The man had been hitting their mother. Larry snapped. No one was killed, but everything was shattered. That night, Luzzie was taken by child services, placed in a foster home. No goodbyes, no explanations, just another strange room, another bed that wasn't his. Brandon, too, bounced around. From one relative to another, to an aunt for a while. Some days felt okay, others felt cold. He stopped expecting any stability. Survival was enough. The system was supposed to protect them. Instead, it scattered them. Luis fell harder. At 15, he was charged with arson. First degree. He doesn't talk about the details, just that he was angry, confused, watching his world collapse once again. He spent 7 months locked away for a parole violation. Brandon didn't go to jail, but he lived through another kind of sentence. His mother, BJ, spiraled into addiction. First pills, then meth, then heroin, crack. He watched her fade. He says, "I smoke a little weed, but I've never touched what she did. I couldn't." That single decision to break the cycle is his quiet revolution. No therapists, no speeches, just a boy deciding he would not become the very thing that broke him. They are not victims. They are not saints. They are young men who inherited a storm and then tried to walk straight through it. Luis says he once dreamed of becoming a nurse, maybe a doctor, something useful. He doesn't say it anymore, but the ghost of that dream lingers in his voice. This is not just a story of shattered dreams or broken homes. It's the story of what happens when a child grows up without soft places to land, without second chances, without safe adults. The trauma is not in their genes. It's in the world that watched them suffer and only offered judgment. And still they survived, hardened, bruised, a little quieter than before, but still standing. Not all dreams are spoken. Some live in the eyes, when they drift to a far-off thought. Some hide in pauses, in the way someone says maybe and then never finishes the sentence. Brandon and Luis have dreams. They just don't always know how to tell them. Brandon wants to leave. That much he says aloud. As soon as I can save up, he says, I'll probably get away from here. He doesn't say when. He doesn't say where. But you can feel the urgency behind his eyes, like something inside him is banging on a locked door. Odd, West Virginia is a place people don't leave. It traps people in shame, in memory, in a history that repeats itself like a curse. Brandon knows this. He knows what his name means to outsiders. He's seen the internet comments, the cameras, the fascination laced with pity. Lou is quieter, but if you ask him about the future, his voice softens. I used to want to be a nurse, maybe even a doctor. He smiles when he says it, as if the thought alone is a kind of escape. But dreams are hard to hold in a house with no heat. In a place where the world has already decided who you are, sometimes survival swallows ambition whole. Sometimes the dream stays silent because speaking it makes it real, and failing it becomes unbearable. So they carry it on long walks down gravel roads. In the way Brandon stands on the porch staring at the treeline like it's the edge of a world he hasn't touched. In the way Luis fiddles with his hands when no one's talking, like he's building something invisible, something that might carry him away. This chapter of their lives is quiet. Not much changes, not much moves. But under that stillness, something breathes. Not anger, not rebellion, just the soft pulse of a dream that refuses to die. They've never had a plan, never had maps, but they've imagined something more, even if they don't yet believe they deserve it. And sometimes, that is the very first step. There's a moment when the camera lingers on Brandon and he doesn't say anything, he just looks. It lasts 3 seconds but says everything, because silence used to be all they had. It was their cage, their armor, their inheritance. But now, slowly, something is breaking open. Brandon has begun to tell his story. Not for forgiveness, not for attention, just because he can. I just want to get away, he says. Somewhere different, somewhere quiet. But not like this. It's not a cry. It's not even a scream. It's a statement of becoming. Lou is more careful. His voice doesn't rise, but his words are whole. He speaks of mistakes, jail, fire, bad choices, but he speaks with the clarity of someone who knows what it cost. He doesn't glorify it. He doesn't defend it. He just says, I was angry. I didn't know what else to do. And that is enough. Because in a world that often speaks about them, they are beginning to speak for themselves. It doesn't sound like freedom. It doesn't sound like rebellion. It sounds like truth. And truth, when spoken plainly, is louder than any noise. There's no cinematic finale, no redemption arc, no sweeping moment of change. There's just a boy on a porch saying maybe he'll leave one day. There's just a brother who once wanted to be a doctor, who still carries that dream like a worn photograph in his back pocket. And that is the voice now emerging. Not from media, not from genetics, but from them. Real, quiet, flawed, brave. They are not the future of a family tree. They are the root of something else entirely. They were born into a silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that hides things. The kind that grows when no one is listening. Brandon and Luis didn't choose this place. They didn't choose this name. They didn't choose the headlines, the whispers, the eyes that followed them. But what they did choose matters. They chose to speak honestly, carefully. Not to perform, not to impress, but just to tell the truth. And in doing that, they broke something. Not the past that still lingers, but the pattern. They are not the shame. They are not the myths. They are not the punchline. They are boys who became men with almost nothing.